Hello, I'm Reagan. At my grandfather's will reading, my sister stood up, smiled, and tore the inheritance letter right in front of the judge. No one stopped her. Not my father. Not the lawyer. Not even the people who used to call me family. They said I didn't belong, that I'd been gone too long, that I didn't earn anything. But what if the house they tried to sell wasn't even theirs to begin with? And what if the only reason they ever wanted me erased was because they knew I was the only one Grandpa trusted? What would you do if your family tried to cut you out of history? The moment I pulled into the Greystone Law parking lot, my stomach started to tighten. Not from nerves, those had dried up years ago, but from something older, deeper, the kind of ache that comes when you know you're walking into a room where people stopped considering you family a long time ago. The office was housed in a historic brick building tucked between a wine bar and a closed antique bookstore. Savannah has a way of making even its knives look polished. I adjusted the collar of my blazer, brushed my thumb over the worn leather of my purse strap, and walked in. The paralegal at the front desk barely looked up. "Name?" "Reagan Greystone," I said, steady and clear. She blinked, glanced at her screen, and frowned. I don't see your name on the attendance list." Of course she didn't. I offered a tight smile. "I was told by Marshall himself to be here. If that's a problem, you can let the judge sort it out." Her eyes narrowed slightly. After a pause too long to be polite, she gestured to the side room. "Fine. Last door on the left." The hallway smelled like lemon polish and dusted off intentions. I paused outside the door, let the scent settle in my memory, then pushed it open. Inside, a long oak table stretched across the room, sunbeams slicing across the chairs through floor-length windows. At the head sat Leonard, my father. Next to him, perfectly poised, was Seraphine. Of course, her name tag was elegant, gold-rimmed, perched in front of her like a trophy. My eyes scanned the rest of the seating. Name tag, name tag, name tag. No name for me. I took the empty seat at the far end, nearest the windows. No tag, no introduction. The sunlight caught the edge of my boot, dusting it with light. I stayed quiet. It wasn't the first time they tried to erase me. Behind me, the door opened again. Heels clicked, perfume wafted, a mix of overripe lilies and wealth. Margot, my stepmother. She floated toward me with a sweet smile painted in permanent marker. "Oh, I'm sorry, what's your name again?" she asked, eyes sparkling just enough to register malice. "Raquel? Remind me." "Reagan," I said flatly. She tapped her temple like she'd just remembered something terribly difficult. "Right. Of course, Reagan. How could I forget?" She moved away before I could respond, which was probably for the best. A couple of cousins chuckled under their breath like it was all part of the entertainment. It was the third time she'd pulled that trick in public. Once is an accident, twice is passive aggression, 3 times, that's surgical. I glanced across the room. Seraphine was glowing, in that way only she could. Expensive clothes, flawless posture, lips that curled just enough to show the camera-friendly version of smugness. She hadn't even glanced in my direction. That made sense. To acknowledge me would be to admit I still existed. I kept my hands folded in my lap, knuckles resting against the leather of the purse I'd carried for 10 years. It had been a gift from Grandpa, Marshall, after I'd completed basic training. "Something sturdy," he'd said. "For someone who doesn't break easy." I didn't break, but I did bend. A lot. The last time I'd been around all of them was Thanksgiving 4 years ago. I came home from deployment unannounced. My room had been converted into a storage closet. Boxes, a treadmill no one used, fake ficus in the corner. The door still had a plaque, but it didn't read Reagan's room anymore. It read storage, seasonal. That was when I knew I wasn't a disappointment. I was a deletion. Back in the room, the temperature shifted. The door creaked open once more. Everyone stiffened slightly as Mr. Bellamy, the estate attorney, stepped in, adjusting his tie with practiced formality. He carried a manila folder and a steel expression. "We'll begin reading Mr. Marshall Greystone's final will. All recognized heirs, please confirm your identity when called." He began with Leonard. "Present," my father answered, voice clipped and confident. "Seraphine?" "Here," she said smoothly, like she was announcing herself at a gala. The names continued. Cousins, uncles, even Margot. My name never came. Bellamy looked down, turned a page. Still nothing. I waited, expecting a pause, a glance, anything. It didn't come. And that's when I knew. This wasn't a mistake. My hand brushed the inside pocket of my coat, fingertips grazing the envelope's edge. I didn't pull it out. Not yet. That piece of paper wasn't just paper. It was weight, warning, and weapon. Grandpa had given it to me under a burnt orange sunset with his coffee half full and his voice already tired. "They won't like this," he'd said, "but you'll know when it's time." This didn't feel like time yet. Bellamy continued reading the will like he was checking off a grocery list. "To my grandson Caleb, I leave my hunting rifles. To Leonard Greystone, I leave my set of signed first edition Hemingway novels and a $10,000 donation in his name to the Georgia Council for Business Ethics." That got a few awkward coughs. Then he read out Seraphine's name. "To Seraphine Greystone, my granddaughter, I leave the family trust account, the proceeds from the summer property in Blue Ridge, and all remaining corporate shares not designated in a separate addendum." She didn't flinch. She didn't need to. That smile of hers, soft, practiced, perfectly measured, already knew. It wasn't just what they gave her. It was what they didn't say about me. Not a single mention. No to my granddaughter Reagan, not even a line about something symbolic like a watch or a family photograph. Just silence. Clean, surgical. And then came the kicker. Bellamy cleared his throat. "A note here. It appears the original signed addendum referred to earlier has been misplaced. What we have is a scanned photocopy, unsigned." There was a slight rustle of papers, like everyone was shifting to hide their discomfort. Seraphine raised a single hand, delicate like she was adjusting a necklace. "Forgive me, but a photocopy?" She gave a soft laugh that was more for the room than for Bellamy. "You know that's not admissible in court, right?" Bellamy didn't answer right away. I watched him shift in his seat, a flicker of discomfort crossing his face before he nodded. "In most cases, no. A signed original is needed for legal enforcement." And just like that, the last thread of credibility snapped. Seraphine leaned back in her chair, satisfied. Margot whispered something to her, and they both smiled like they'd just confirmed dessert was on its way. My mouth stayed shut. I wasn't going to throw punches in a room full of lawyers until I had the right weapon, and right now, that weapon was still tucked in my coat. The lights dimmed for a moment as the media screen in the corner flickered to life. Bellamy motioned toward it. "Per Mr. Greystone's wishes, we'll now show a brief memorial slideshow." Photos faded in and out. Grandpa in his Navy uniform, Grandpa at the garden table with Leonard and Margot, Grandpa and Seraphine at the boardwalk, and then the old front porch of Springridge House. I recognized the day instantly. It was early fall. I was 13. My hair was in 2 loose braids, and Grandpa had let me paint the railing with him. I'd gotten paint on my overalls, and he laughed so hard he nearly dropped the brush. But in the photo, I wasn't there. Grandpa was on the porch. The paint cans were in the frame, So was Seraphine, sitting in the corner, holding a glass of lemonade she hadn't helped pour. But no Reagan. I'd been cropped out. Slide after slide, the story unfolded, a version of our family where I'd never existed. I knew that dress. I knew that dog. I knew that trip to Charleston, even though my body was missing from every captured moment. Someone had edited the truth. I felt the burn in my chest, not tears, not this time, but that slow, rising heat that comes when someone takes your memories and calls them their own. When they take your place at the table and tell you the chair was never yours. They're not just erasing me, I thought. They're rewriting the whole thing. The video ended. The lights came back on. Bellamy adjusted his glasses. That concludes the formal reading and presentation of Mr. Greystone's estate, unless anyone here has additional documentation to provide. He looked around the room with a neutral face. Seraphine's eyes scanned the room too, but not for information. She was checking for weakness. I reached into my coat pocket. I didn't pull out the envelope yet. I just held it there, my fingers curled around the edges like it might float away if I didn't anchor it. Grandpa had told me to wait for the moment they made it clear. They never planned to include me. Well, moment received. They thought ripping the paper would erase me, but they forgot. He never trusted them with the original. I gathered the torn pieces slowly, pressing each one flat on my lap, as if they were petals from something sacred. I didn't look at anyone, not Seraphine, not Margot, and definitely not the lawyer who'd just let it happen without a blink. My hands stayed steady, but inside, I was calculating. That letter hadn't been a surprise attack. It was insurance. Grandpa knew what they were capable of. The version I'd just watched Seraphine destroy, that wasn't the only one he'd given me. It wasn't even the one that mattered most. Still, watching it shredded like grocery mail in front of a room full of people who already treated me like a footnote, that stung deeper than I cared to admit. Bellamy cleared his throat like he was about to say something, then didn't. His silence had weight, heavy, intentional. I lifted my eyes and met his. "You saw the seal," I said. "You know it was real?" He looked down at the open folder in front of him and adjusted his glasses without answering. Then, almost like he hadn't heard me at all, he turned to Leonard. "Do you have anything else to add on behalf of the family?" On behalf of the family. There it was again, that phrase they always used to close the door, to remind me that I wasn't part of the inner circle anymore, if I ever had been. Leonard simply shook his head. "Nothing that isn't obvious." My father hadn't said my name once, not even when my letter had been torn to pieces right in front of him. It wasn't that he didn't care, it was that he wanted me to see it, to feel what it was like to be erased so thoroughly. Even your name left a bad taste. A rustle of paper. Someone coughed. I stood up, not in anger, not to make a scene, but because sitting felt like surrender, and I wasn't done yet. 2 weeks before Grandpa passed, I said to the room, voice clear and even. He told me they would do this, that the only thing more dangerous than a lie was silence, and that if I ever found myself in a room full of people trying to rewrite the truth, I should remember who taught me to build with my hands. Seraphine scoffed. "Oh, please, don't turn this into a speech." She was still standing by the table, the torn paper a crumpled mass in her fist. "You think anyone believes that little drama you staged?" she went on. "Grandpa was sick, confused. You saw him maybe once a year, and suddenly you're the keeper of his legacy? You really think the only thing he left me was paper?" I asked. That got her attention. Her mouth twitched, just slightly. "What are you talking about?" But I didn't answer. Instead, I folded the remains of the letter and placed them back inside my coat. The same coat I'd worn when Grandpa handed me the real envelope. That moment played again in my mind, me sitting next to him on the porch swing, the late summer breeze carrying the scent of fresh-cut grass. He'd been quiet that evening. We'd shared a cup of lemon tea, and I remember him saying, "They'll come for it, Ria, not because they want it, but because they can't stand the idea of you having anything they didn't give you. That's the difference. You earn things. They inherit." A few minutes later, I left the building through the side exit. No one tried to stop me. I wasn't worth the trouble. Not yet. Outside, the late afternoon had dipped into golden hour. The sky had that amber sheen Savannah gets in September when the heat hasn't quite let go, but the shadows have started to lengthen. I didn't rush to my car. Instead, I walked 2 blocks down to the park Grandpa used to take me to. Same cracked bench, same magnolia tree that leaned just a little too far left. I sat, pulled out my phone, and sent a message to the one person Grandpa told me to contact if things ever went sideways. All I typed was, "It's time." A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. "Bring what you have. They can't erase paper trails." I took a deep breath and finally let the silence settle. Not because I was giving up, but because I was getting ready. They took my name off the deed, but they forgot. I still have the key with his initials. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I drove past the courthouse, out of town, through the stretch of country road that led to Spring Ridge House. The sun was starting to dip behind the tree line, casting that honey-colored light across the edges of the fields. The last time I drove this road, Grandpa was sitting in the passenger seat, talking about chimney repairs and how we'd finally need to replace the shutters. When I pulled up to the gates, something felt off. There was a sleek black SUV parked just outside the front circle, and the front lights of the house were on, even though no one was supposed to be living there. I tried the front gate keypad, out of habit. It buzzed, flashed red. Invalid code. I backed up, parked across the street near the old mailbox, and walked around the side yard. The hydrangeas Grandpa had planted were wilted and choking behind overgrown weeds. The side fence, the one only he and I ever used, had been cut and replaced with a newer latch. The back porch door didn't budge when I turned the knob, so I checked the windows. The smallest one by the pantry, always the one we left cracked in the summer, was still open just enough to slip a hand through. I climbed in, scraped my elbow on the frame, and landed inside with a dull thud on the old hardwood floor. It smelled different now, stale air fresheners and something artificial. Gone was the scent of old books, lemon polish, and cedar. I moved quietly through the hallway, bypassing the main staircase, and headed straight to my old bedroom. Or what used to be mine. The nameplate was gone. No Reagan's room like it had read since I was 6. In its place was a sticky note that read, "Holiday decor." I pushed the door open and my breath caught. It was a storage closet now, cardboard boxes labeled Misk, a rusted exercise bike, a fake Christmas tree still in shrink wrap. My bookshelf was gone. So was the hand-carved bed Grandpa had spent 2 months sanding himself. In the far corner, I spotted something familiar, an old photo frame I'd made in middle school, buried under a pile of broken blinds. I didn't touch anything. I walked out slowly, heart numb, the sound of my boots echoing down the hallway where family used to shout my name. Now it was just dust and other people's junk. I made my way downstairs and pushed open the double doors to the sitting room. That's when I saw it. A for sale sign leaning against the fireplace, not in the yard, not outside, but tucked away inside, like they'd tried to hide it from curious eyes. I pulled out my phone, typed in the house address into Zillow, and there it was. Pending sale. My name wasn't anywhere, but listed under property contact was Margot Greystone, my stepmother. Of course it was her. My throat tightened, not with sadness, but with disgust. She hadn't just taken over Grandpa's home, she was getting ready to sell it, flip it like some fixer-upper with no soul. I pressed call. Seraphine answered after the second ring, her tone already sharp. "You're not supposed to be there. You listed Springridge?" I kept my voice low, steady. "Without telling anyone?" She sighed. "You're not anyone who needs to be told." There was a pause. I heard her breathe in, slow and deliberate. "You always act like being left out is some personal attack. Maybe it's not about you, Reagan. Maybe it's just business." I ended the call before she could finish. I didn't have the energy to let her rewrite that too. As I walked back through the house, past Grandpa's favorite reading chair, the fireplace where he used to read Twain to me, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the small velvet pouch I'd kept zipped into the lining since his funeral. Inside was a key. Not just any key, his spare, the one with the tiny initials MG, etched crudely into the base with his old wood-burning tool. It was heavy, solid, real. I stared at it in my palm as the light from the hallway flickered against its teeth. They could fake paperwork, twist words, sell off furniture, repaint rooms, but they couldn't erase that key. That house was never just wood and brick. It held memories, promises, pain. My mother's wedding veil was still boxed upstairs, her books, the old record player that skipped during Sinatra. 2 years ago, Grandpa had said, "You'll know when to take it back." I did now. I left through the side door, retraced my steps across the yard, and drove back into town in silence. I didn't play music, didn't think about what I'd say next, but I knew this much. They could try to erase me all they wanted, but the house knew who it belonged to. They took my voice off the stage, but I had already sent my proof to someone who still believed in truth. The morning after the ambush at Springridge, I sat at the corner booth of a diner 3 blocks from the courthouse, nursing a lukewarm cup of coffee and picking at dry toast. My phone buzzed against the Formica table, an unknown number. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened my inbox and stared at the email again. The subject line read, "Legacy Narrative Adjustments." It had come in late the night before, CC'd to me by mistake, sent from Seraphine's PR consultant. Beneath all the corporate lingo and empty pleasantries was one damning line. "If she submits anything for the memorial service, make sure it doesn't air. That message needs to disappear." I reread it twice, just to make sure I hadn't imagined it. I hadn't. The memorial was scheduled for 1 p.m. at the largest chapel in Savannah. It had been planned without me. Invitations, speaker list, press coverage, all handled by Seraphine and Leonard. They didn't bother telling me where to sit because they assumed I wouldn't show. But I did. I arrived 20 minutes early, slipped in through the side entrance, and found an empty spot in the 3rd row, out of direct sight of the cameras. Seraphine stood at the podium, dressed in a dove-gray suit, her voice soft and perfectly modulated. "My grandfather taught us grace," she said, "and legacy. And that family isn't who shares your blood. It's who shares your vision." I almost laughed. Almost. After her, the estate lawyer gave some formal remarks, followed by a community leader Grandpa once supported with his Veterans Fund. I kept quiet, calm. I wasn't there to steal a spotlight. I was there to see if they had the nerve to cut me out completely. They did. When the media director announced, "We'll now show a tribute video prepared by members of the family," I felt the shift. My clip was supposed to be included at the 5-minute mark, 4 minutes and 37 seconds in, to be exact. I'd timed it. Instead, it cut directly from Seraphine's montage to a closing slide with the Greystone Foundation logo and a soft piano track. The MC, not missing a beat, said into the mic, "Due to a technical glitch, we'll conclude here. Thank you all for being with us today." Polite applause, no gasps, no objections. Just a tidy ending. I stayed seated, counted to 10, and then got up without looking at anyone. Outside, the parking lot was a mix of soft murmurs and camera clicks. I ignored them. What mattered wasn't what was shown on screen, it was what was already in motion. 2 nights before, I had recorded my own tribute video in the garage of the small rental house I lived in. I used my phone, a tripod made from stacked books, and natural light from the one unbroken window. No script, just my voice, and Grandpa's voice at the end from an old voicemail he'd left me during my second tour overseas. "This isn't about money," he'd said. "It's about remembering who cared when no one was looking." I labeled the file "In Case They Cut Me" and uploaded it to a secure drive. That link had already been sent to one person, Miles, the private document analyst Grandpa once worked with, the same one he trusted to verify personal estate files in the past. I walked straight from the chapel to Miles's office. He didn't work out of some glossy firm downtown. His place was above a barber shop, with a doorbell that buzzed 3 seconds too late and stairs that creaked under every step. He didn't ask questions, just took the USB from my hand and said, "You want this confirmed and time-stamped?" I nodded. He plugged it in, watched the video silently, then looked up at me. "They cut this?" "They tried." He clicked a few keys, saved the file into an encrypted folder, and backed it up to 3 separate locations. Then he handed me a printed copy of the email thread Seraphine's team had sent. I hadn't asked him to dig for it, but he had. Someone on their team sent this from a public network. "Sloppy, too easy to trace," he said. "This'll hold up in court." I thanked him and left the building with a strange stillness inside me. Not pride, not victory, something quieter, the kind of peace that comes from knowing you didn't let them shut you up. That night, I returned to the rental and sat on the porch with a notebook, writing out everything I could remember about the last few months. Every email, every offhand comment, every shift in tone. I didn't trust memory anymore. I needed paper, ink, timelines. Before bed, I checked my phone one last time. A message waited, from Seraphine. No greeting, no apology, just, "This is beneath you, Reagan. Let it go." I didn't respond. I forwarded it to Miles. Then I shut off my phone, pulled the blanket over my knees, and watched the porch light flicker against the bushes, wondering how many lies they thought they could bury in silence. Because here's what they never understood. Silence isn't the absence of voice. It's the moment before it rises. The judge wouldn't ignore this. Not when I had records, receipts, and the key they never saw coming. The following morning, I left the house before the sun had finished climbing over the horizon. The streets were quiet, blanketed in that early golden stillness that only Savannah could offer. I drove out toward Spring Ridge, not because I had to, but because I needed to. Something in my gut told me that the answers I hadn't yet found were still hiding inside those walls. I parked 2 houses down. The same SUV was still in the driveway, tires angled like someone had left in a rush and never fixed it. I slipped the velvet pouch from my coat and took out the key. Grandpa's initials were still there, carved deep, uneven, hand-burned, permanent. I moved along the side path, pushed open the gate behind the tool shed, and entered through the cellar door, which still had the old slide lock Grandpa never bothered to fix. Inside, the air was heavier than I remembered, more stale than sacred. I knew where to go. Back office, left hallway, behind the false panel under the built-in bookcase. My fingers knew the panel's edges without even looking. I pulled gently until it clicked. Inside were 2 items, a black ledger and a bank envelope marked Private RG. I sat cross-legged on the hardwood floor and opened them. The ledger wasn't just numbers, it was evidence of a plan. Monthly transfers, all marked Legacy Allotment. Every deposit went into a trust account created in my name until 12 months ago. That's when the routing numbers changed. My name remained, But the destination bank was different, and the recipient? Not me. It was Seraphine, not just her. The trust was registered under the Greystone Family Charity Initiative, a name she had plastered all over brochures, donor drives, and brunch tables. The same charity she'd been parading as proof of her virtue. The same one she'd claimed she'd built from the ground up. Except it was never hers, it was mine. Every cent came from Grandpa. Every dollar she'd been flaunting came from a fund meant for me. And he had made sure it wasn't just sentiment. He had left documentation. I copied the routing history with my phone, scanned the ledgers page by page, and then pulled the manila envelope open. Inside, a single folded document, signed by Grandpa, notarized, dated 2 weeks before his stroke. Fund to be held in Reagan Greystone's name, accessible only through her verified identity. No secondary access authorized. Use only if legal attempts are made to redirect. He knew. I don't know how, but he knew. I folded everything carefully, replaced the panel, and retraced my steps to the cellar, locking the latch behind me. My car ride back into town was silent. I didn't need music. I needed clarity, and I got it. That afternoon, I drove to the north side of town. There, tucked between a dog grooming service and a tax office, was the place I needed, Evron Associates. The nameplate hadn't changed in over 20 years. Mr. Evron had been Grandpa's accountant since the mid-'80s, and the only person in that family's orbit who ever treated me like I wasn't invisible. I walked in without an appointment. The receptionist looked up. "Can I help?" "Tell Roger it's Reagan Greystone. I have the file Marshall told him to expect." Her eyebrows lifted. "Oh." 10 minutes later, I was seated across from the man himself. Older now, eyes more sunken, but still wearing the same mustard sweater vest he always had. He looked at the ledger and the folder and said nothing for a long time. Then he nodded once. "Marshall didn't trust many people at the end, but he trusted you." He slid a drawer open and pulled out another file, thicker, older, with yellowed edges. He left a backup, same documentation, same fund. "Only difference is, yours was supposed to be public." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "He wanted the charity in your name, not Seraphine's. He had plans, vet support, housing for female soldiers. You were going to run it, after the military, after everything." I stared at him, my mind scrambling to keep up. "She used my fund to build her image. She's giving speeches about veterans like she's ever sat in a VA waiting room." He handed me another slip, one Seraphine had signed, notarized, and dated, approving a transfer from that account into her foundation. Forged signature. She had lifted mine from an old medical document. Roger confirmed it wasn't authentic. "They're not just stealing money," I said. "They're laundering memory." He nodded again. "And now you have everything you need to stop them." I left his office with 2 folders, 1 USB drive, and an assurance that Mr. Evron would testify if needed. Later that day, I walked into a boutique law firm near the courthouse. Sleek, polished. I wasn't interested in drama. I was interested in facts. I stepped up to the receptionist's desk and handed her the files. "Tell your lead counsel I'm not here to sue." She blinked. "Then what?" "I'm here to reclaim what's mine. Tomorrow I would take back more than a house. I'd take back my name." That night, I barely slept. I wasn't anxious. I was ready. The kind of readiness that comes when you've done your part, gathered every document, and laid your truth bare. My coffee went cold on the windowsill while I read through Evron's files again, highlighting everything Grandpa had quietly put in place. Every word, every signature, every clause lined up like a quiet army. At 8:27 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Evron. "We're parked. I have it in hand." "You?" 5 minutes out. By 8:40, I pulled into the courthouse parking lot and spotted Evron waiting by his rust-colored Lincoln, holding a sealed envelope close to his chest like it carried national secrets. I nodded to him and we walked inside together, two people invisible to that family until now. The hearing wasn't scheduled to start until 9 o'clock, but the courtroom was already buzzing. I stepped through the doors and saw Seraphine seated at the counsel table, flanked by two attorneys in matching navy suits, like they'd been pulled straight from a magazine ad for generational wealth. She didn't look at me, didn't need to, her posture said enough. Confident, untouchable. I took my seat on the opposite bench and placed the folder and the USB on the table. No theatrics, no glares, just truth, ready to speak for itself. Judge Kinley entered exactly on time. Gray bob, burgundy robe, eyes that had seen every excuse in the book. She scanned the room and got straight to it. This court has reconvened to examine new evidence regarding the estate of Marshall Greystone. Ms. Reagan Greystone, you have requested to introduce material previously withheld? Yes, Your Honor, I replied, standing. I have a notarized document from Mr. Roger Evron, longtime accountant to the deceased, along with a video file recorded by Mr. Greystone prior to his death. Please proceed. Evron stood, adjusted his blazer, and walked the letter to the bailiff. The judge accepted it and began reading immediately. It wasn't long before her expression shifted, just slightly. Not surprise, but recognition. This letter confirms that the Spring Ridge estate was intended to be transferred in full to Ms. Reagan Greystone, she read aloud, and that all previous assumptions or verbal agreements made by other parties are to be considered void unless recorded in legal form. She paused, then looked up at Seraphine. Do you have anything to contest this with, counselor? Her lawyer stood, poised. Your Honor, we were under the impression that the original copy of such a letter did not exist. We would request a handwriting and document authenticity examination. It has already been authenticated, I said calmly. 2 independent analysts confirmed it yesterday. Both reports are included in that folder. Judge Kinley nodded. Let's view the video. The courtroom lights dimmed, and the flat screen on the wall flickered to life. Grandpa appeared, seated in his favorite armchair, sunlight pooling through the window behind him. If you're seeing this, he began, it means they did exactly what I warned you they would. He spoke slowly, clearly, no confusion in his voice, no trembling hands, just that steel steadiness that had carried him through war and boardrooms. They'll tell you it was never yours, that you didn't earn it, but you did, because you never asked for it. You just showed up. You listened when no one else did. You stayed when I was hard to love. So I'm giving you what I built. He paused, leaned in a little closer to the camera. This house isn't just walls, it's memory, and if they try to strip your name from it, this video is your receipt. The screen went black. Silence fell over the courtroom like a dropped curtain. For the first time, Seraphine shifted in her chair. One of her lawyers leaned in and whispered something. Her jaw tightened. She didn't argue, though. She couldn't. Outside, the media had already caught wind of the hearing. A local news station had been tipped off by someone, maybe even one of the courthouse clerks. Within 30 minutes, the clip had leaked. By lunchtime, a Twitter thread had gone viral. The PR queen's sister just dethroned her in court. Screenshots of Grandpa's face, headlines questioning Seraphine's foundation, comments from veterans who remembered Reagan showing up to memorial events while Seraphine posed for photo ops. And then came the calls. Board members from the Greystone Foundation, donors, even family friends who hadn't called me in 5 years. Suddenly, everyone remembered I existed. Suddenly, I was useful again, but I didn't answer any of them. I sat in the back corner of the courthouse cafeteria with a tuna sandwich and a bottle of water, letting the buzz swirl around me without pulling me in. By 3:15, Judge Kinley reconvened and issued her interim ruling. Until a full final judgment is rendered, she announced, all transactions involving the Spring Ridge estate are to be frozen. No sale, no transfer, no reallocation. Furthermore, the court finds that Ms. Reagan Greystone's documentation warrants recognition and priority for consideration as primary heir. Seraphine didn't look at me when we passed in the hallway. She didn't have to. She knew, and that was enough. But the real legacy wasn't the mansion. It was what I chose to build inside it. I arrived early, 30 minutes before the final hearing, dressed in all black. Nothing dramatic, just clean lines, simple slacks, a high-collar blouse, and boots I could walk miles in. No jewelry, no lipstick, just me, present, unapologetic. The courthouse steps were already lined with local media. Some I recognized from the neighborhood newspaper, others from stations I hadn't watched in years. They didn't call my name when I walked past, but they didn't look away either. That was enough. Inside, the air was cooler, formal. Judge Kinley was already seated when I entered. Her expression was unreadable. That was her gift, neutrality with a heartbeat. I took my place. Evron sat behind me, calm and steady. Seraphine was late. She swept in 3 minutes after the hour, flanked by only one attorney this time. Her hair was slightly disheveled, foundation patchy at the jawline. Her phone buzzed against her clutch, which she didn't answer. She barely looked at me, but I noticed the tremor in her hand when she sat down. Kinley began, voice firm. This court has reviewed all submitted evidence. We have confirmed the authenticity of the letter produced by Mr. Evron, as well as supporting bank documentation and the audiovisual file presented by Ms. Reagan Greystone. She paused, gaze direct. Do you have anything further to add, Ms. Seraphine Greystone? Seraphine stood slowly, cleared her throat, then offered the faintest shake of her head. No, Your Honor. No speech, no denial, no spin. That was the loudest silence she had ever given. Kinley continued. Then this court finds Reagan Greystone the sole legal heir of the Spring Ridge estate, as designated by Marshall Greystone in a signed, notarized, and independently verified document. Seraphine's jaw clenched. The judge wasn't finished. All actions to obstruct this inheritance, digitally or physically, are deemed void and subject to reversal. This includes the attempted sale of the property, the reallocation of trust funds, and all associated public representations of ownership. She turned her attention to the bailiff, who exited briefly, then returned carrying a modest black box. Ms. Greystone, Kinley said, this house carries more than walls. It carries legacy. Use it well. The bailiff approached my table. He opened the box, revealing 2 items, the original deed, updated, certified, embossed with the Gold County seal, and the key. My grandfather's key, the one I hadn't seen since I was 17, the one that used to hang from the hook beside the kitchen door. Its edges were worn, the brass dulled with age, but the initials remained, MG. I stood, took it gently from the box, and felt the room shift. No applause, no grand moment, just a passing of weight from one generation to the next. I didn't look at Seraphine as I walked past her table, though I saw her shoulders tighten. Her eyes never met mine. She just sat there, stunned and small. She had come dressed for a crowning, but left with nothing but silence. Outside, the air was warmer than I expected. The crowd of cameras parted as I stepped through the doors. For a split second, I caught my reflection in the glass panel. Not broken, not erased, whole. I didn't give a statement, didn't wave. I simply got into my car, placed the deed on the passenger seat, and turned toward the one place I hadn't allowed myself to visit freely in months: the house. I pulled into the Spring Ridge driveway at noon. The gates were unlocked, the lawn slightly overgrown, as if it had been waiting for someone who hadn't come home in a while. I parked, stepped out, and walked to the front door, not through the side, not through a window, but with the key that belonged to me. It slid into the lock with a subtle click, like it remembered me. Inside, the air was still. Dust swirled in shafts of light spilling through the living room windows. My boots echoed on the hardwood, each step feeling like it belonged. I didn't cry. Instead, I walked through each room slowly, touching door frames, adjusting crooked paintings, noting what needed patching. In the hallway, I passed the old photo of my mother in her wedding dress, still crooked, still half covered by glare. I left it that way. In the kitchen, I opened the fridge, empty. I didn't mind. I didn't come back for what could be eaten. I came back to rebuild. And if you've ever been erased by the people who were supposed to protect you, build something so loud they can't ignore it anymore. The week after the ruling passed in a rhythm all its own. No reporters camped out anymore. No more calls from lawyers or former board members wanting to reconnect. The noise faded, and in its place came something softer. Stillness. I spent the first few days at Spring Ridge alone. The air inside had that unused quality, like the house had been holding its breath. I opened the windows wide, let the light in, and started cleaning out the rooms one by one. I began with my mother's study. It was tucked in the back wing where few people ever bothered to go. When I pushed the door open, it smelled faintly of lavender and ink. The books were still in place, though many were gathering dust, their spines sagging, some pages yellowed with time. In the bottom drawer of her old roll-top desk, I found a faded manila folder labeled in Grandpa's handwriting, Reagan, Plan. Inside were sketches, blueprints, notes, all outlining his dream of turning Spring Ridge into a home for displaced female veterans. His handwriting was still sharp, steady. In the margins, he'd written, "This house was built to shelter more than one story." I sat with that for a long while. By the end of the week, I'd registered the property as a nonprofit. Quietly, no press, no ribbon cutting, just a signature on a form, notarized, sealed, and filed with the county. We called it the Hollow Foundation. No big website. Just a mission: transitional housing and emotional support for women returning from service who'd been chewed up and spit out by the system. No questions asked. Our first guest arrived on a Thursday morning. Her name was Tori, 26, discharged honorably after reporting harassment by her commanding officer. She carried 2 duffel bags and an expression I recognized too well, part defiance, part defeat. I didn't ask her anything, just handed her a mug of chamomile tea and showed her to the room with the yellow curtains. She stood in the doorway for a moment, not stepping inside, as if she wasn't sure she was allowed to. "You're safe here," I said. She nodded, but didn't speak. Just stepped in, sat on the edge of the bed, and let the silence hold her. That night, I walked the halls alone. Spring Ridge didn't echo the same way it used to. The creaks in the floorboards didn't feel haunted. They felt like memory stretching its legs again. As I passed the staircase, I saw movement through the glass at the front gate. It was Seraphine. She stood in the cold, arms crossed, not shivering, but not steady either. She didn't ring the bell. She didn't call out. Just stood there like she was waiting for something, maybe permission. I didn't open the gate. Instead, I walked down to the end of the driveway, far enough that we could see each other clearly, but close enough to know we weren't having a conversation. She looked at me, eyes dull, makeup minimal, voice small. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I tilted my head slightly. She added, I didn't know he left it all for you. I thought I had to fight for what I was owed. You weren't owed this, I said. She blinked. You're right. There was a long pause, then she glanced at the house, at the open windows, at the sound of music playing faintly upstairs. This is what you're doing with it? She asked. I nodded once. She offered the barest smile, almost imperceptible. Then she turned and left. Some doors stay closed for good reason. Later that night, I stood in the hallway where Grandpa used to hang our family pictures. Most of them were gone now, packed away or tossed in boxes during the chaos. But one photo remained, tucked behind an old bulletin board. It was the two of us. Me, probably 5 years old, sitting on his lap wearing a paper crown made from birthday wrapping paper. He wore one too, crooked and too small for his head, grinning like it was the best hat he'd ever owned. I pinned it to the board. No frame, just thumbtacks. Underneath it, I wrote, Legacy isn't what you leave, it's who you trust to carry it. Some families don't need to scream to silence you. They just write you out quietly and expect you not to notice. But silence doesn't mean surrender. Sometimes the strongest revenge is reclaiming your name without ever raising your voice. Have you ever been treated like a stranger in your own family? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more true, powerful revenge stories that hit close to home. Hello, my name is Sydney, and I was never really part of the family that raised me. My mom once tore up my medical records in public, screaming that I was letting my sister die. My father stood beside her and called me a selfish mistake. They tried to force me to give up half my liver for a sister who used to laugh when I cried, who told our school I was adopted, before I even knew it was true. But the part that still wakes me at night? The doctor's 6 words, and the way my mother collapsed when she finally couldn't lie anymore. What happens when your whole life was built on a lie, and you were the insurance policy all along? I stayed in that chair, frozen, humiliated, and suddenly very sure that this wasn't just about a liver. The air around me had thinned, as if every breath was borrowed, not earned. Shreds of my medical file fluttered around my feet, landing like discarded receipts of a transaction I never agreed to. My mother stood over me, heaving with theatrical grief, demanding I do the right thing, as if that phrase still held meaning in our household. Do you think you get to sit there and act like some sort of victim? She snapped, her voice cutting through the hushed lobby like a dropped tray. Your sister is dying. Dying, Sydney. And you're doing nothing. Absolutely nothing. I glanced around, not at her, but at the strangers watching. A nurse pretending to tidy a file cart, a woman holding her toddler tighter, a receptionist tapping aimlessly at her keyboard. I saw it. The discomfort, the pity, the assumptions. No one came to my defense. That wasn't new. I bent to gather a few of the papers that had landed by my shoes, not out of guilt. I needed them. Proof. Record. Something solid. Something that couldn't be twisted like a bedtime story. My hand shook only slightly. Controlled. Mom took a step closer, almost whispering now, as if the drop in decibel made it more intimate, more sincere. I didn't raise you to be this cold, this ungrateful. We gave you everything. I looked up, right into her eyes. You gave me what you thought I owed you for. She blinked. And that was it. The first moment of quiet, not agreement, not peace, just the hollow space where her outrage had nowhere to go. Then came the scream. You're letting your sister die! It echoed. Actually echoed. And she knew it would. A nurse stood frozen near the vending machine. A security guard down the hall turned his head. Mom's voice carried like a headline. I didn't flinch, I didn't cry, I didn't move, because I knew this wasn't the first time she performed grief, and I wouldn't be the one to hand her an encore. From behind the glass wall of room 311, Vera lay in her hospital bed, pale but composed. Chemotherapy had softened the lines of her once impeccable makeup habits, but not her gaze. Her eyes caught mine, held them, and she smiled. Not a smile of gratitude, not relief, not even hope. Ownership. That was always her specialty. She didn't mouth anything. She didn't need to. Her look said everything. I'm still the center. You're still orbiting. A part of me had expected pity from her, or maybe desperation, but seeing that look, smug, satisfied, it did something strange. It unburied something. I stood slowly, gathering what papers I could. My mother's breathing, erratic just moments ago, now steadied as she turned her rage into a martyr's silence. You'll regret this, Sydney, she said softly, not looking at me. One day when she's gone, when this family is gone, you'll remember this moment and you'll hate yourself. I tilted my head, not mocking, just studying. Funny, I murmured. I remember a lot of moments. And none of them looked like family. With that, I turned, not toward Vera, not toward my mother, not even toward the exit. I walked toward the nurse's station. A few of the bystanders cleared a path. The nurse who'd been closest to the scene met my eyes briefly. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then hesitated. I didn't need her words. I didn't need hers or anyone else's, because everything I had ever wanted to say, every rebuttal, every explanation, every proof that I wasn't what they painted me to be, was already behind me. On the floor, torn, and still, more intact than what they had tried to build as a family. As I reached the far end of the corridor, I stopped. Just for a second. The clock on the wall read 10:42 a.m. I remember that detail because I remember thinking, this is when everything breaks, not when they screamed, but when I didn't. I didn't yell, I didn't collapse, I just walked. And the moment my foot crossed into the adjacent hallway, I knew something that rattled me more than anything else that morning. They weren't here to save Vera. They were here to prove I could still be controlled. But I didn't give them that, and I wouldn't. Not now, not ever again. But the next blow didn't come from my mother. It came from my father. I hadn't even gotten a full step past the nurse's station before I felt the weight of his presence. He didn't call my name. He never had, not with warmth, just stood there, broad, upright, like the world owed him respect for still being alive. His shadow landed across the tiles in front of me, and I paused because I wanted to believe he might finally say something that wasn't rehearsed, weaponized, or designed to fold me back into the silence. Instead, he said it like a fact, not an insult, not a scream, just a statement. You're just a selfish mistake. No raised voice, no accusatory finger, not even a twitch in his jaw. That was the worst part. It wasn't said in anger. It was said like he'd believed it for a long time and had simply run out of reasons to pretend otherwise. I blinked, but I didn't cry. I didn't ask him what he meant. That would have given him the dignity of disbelief. Instead, I let the words hit me like wet cement, pressing down but hardening quickly. I wouldn't let them sink too deep. Behind him, Vera's room was still lit like a stage. She hadn't moved. She didn't need to. That little smirk she wore when I entered was still etched across her face like a scar she never had to explain. I stepped aside to avoid brushing his shoulder. That used to feel like defiance. Now it just felt like maintenance of my space, my breath, my body. Walking away, I could feel every year of my life press against my back like a hand trying to push me toward apology. I kept walking. When I reached the water fountain near the family consultation lounge, I stopped, not to drink, just to breathe. And that's when my mind, traitor that it sometimes was, began flipping through memories like old case files. One vacation when I was 10, Vera got the window seat on the plane. I got the middle seat between my parents and the drink cart. Mom said I was too short to need the view. My 16th birthday, Vera got a car. I got a sweater. Dad said, "You don't go anywhere anyway." The college acceptance letter I never got to read because Vera spilled coffee on it before I could open it. She swore it was an accident. Mom believed her. "Be grateful," they always said. "We didn't have to take you in." Even when I didn't know I was adopted, I heard the tone. I knew I was being reminded of a debt I never asked to owe. I didn't realize I'd leaned against the wall until a nurse walked past and glanced my way. Her eyes met mine, brief, unreadable, then kept moving. No one asked if I was okay, and honestly, I was glad. I didn't want a witness for this moment. I needed it to be mine. I pulled my phone from my pocket, hands steady now. I scrolled through my inbox, found the subject line I knew by heart: National Donor Match Results. Confidential. There it was. Dated 6 months ago. From the day I heard Vera was sick. The day I took the test before anyone asked me to. Before guilt was sent to collect. I hadn't told them. I thought maybe, just maybe, if I wasn't a match, it would end there. That logic had clearly been naive. I tapped forward. Entered Dr. Hallstrom's contact. Added Lorelei, my friend and emergency backup for every legal mess I never expected but had learned to plan for. Subject line: reconfirming non-compatibility. For records. Before hitting send, I stared at the screen. At my own name, my real name, Sydney Hale. Not Vera's sister, not Coraline's daughter. Just Sydney. I hit send. When I lifted my head, Dad was gone. So was Mom. I imagined they had moved on to the next round of moral blackmail, or maybe they were meeting with hospital staff to whisper about my emotional instability. They'd done it before. The irony was, they had spent so many years convincing others I was dramatic, fragile, damaged, and I had spent just as many trying to be level-headed, quiet, rational. But now I realized something that startled even me. I didn't want their approval anymore. Their disappointment no longer hurt. It clarified. It proved I'd stepped far enough away from their game to finally see the rules. Back in the lobby, the nurse behind the desk gave me a cautious smile. "Do you need a visitor pass to re-enter the room?" I shook my head. "No, I'm stepping out for a bit." "Will you be back?" I considered her question, not just in terms of today, but ever. "I'll let you know," I said, and walked out the door. Outside, the air had cooled. Early spring in Raleigh had that particular scent, blooming magnolias mixed with city dust and wet concrete. It grounded me in the real world, away from fluorescent lights and old family stories. As I reached the parking garage, I paused. My car wasn't there. I'd taken a rideshare this morning because I hadn't trusted myself to drive. I called another, 5 minutes out. Enough time to do one more thing. I opened the Notes app on my phone and typed, "If they ever try to say I refused without reason, here's the timeline. Tested, October 19th. Results received, October 24th. Notified, National Registry confirms I'm not a match." Then, without thinking too hard, I added, "You cannot donate what you don't have. You cannot love where you're not allowed to exist, and you cannot stay where you were never really invited." I saved it. The car pulled up. I got in, gave the address of a coffee shop a few blocks away. Somewhere quiet. Neutral. I needed a moment, not to escape, but to think. They wanted to turn me into a villain. But I wasn't going to play that role. I had my facts, my proof, and soon, I'd have my voice. Not the one that whispered to stay small, but the one that had been slowly clearing its throat for years. They thought I was a mistake, but I was about to show them what a mistake looks like when it finally stops apologizing. A few minutes after I left the hospital's side entrance, I found a bench across the street near a quiet bus stop. I wasn't planning on going anywhere. I just needed somewhere to sit without being watched, without voices echoing inside my chest. I pulled my coat tighter, not because I was cold, but because I needed to feel something wrapped around me that didn't want to take anything from me. That's when my phone buzzed. I assumed it was Lorelei checking in, maybe even a work message. But it wasn't either. Subject line: "Saw the news. Thought you might need this." It was from Olivia Reyes. I hadn't seen or heard from her in nearly 13 years. She moved away the summer before senior year. She was the only person who ever saw what really happened behind our doors and chose not to look away. There was no greeting, just a short message. "I've kept this. Didn't know if it mattered anymore. But I saw your name. I knew it would." Attached were 3 scanned images. The first was a lined notebook page with Olivia's handwriting at the top. Sydney, after the stairs. Underneath, a short description of what she'd witnessed that day. The scream, the thud, the way Vera smiled as she called for Mom. The second image stopped my breath. It was a Polaroid. Faded, grainy, but undeniable. The outline of a bruise across my ribs. The date written in ink on the bottom. May 16th, 2009. The third was a folded note, my handwriting. I had forgotten it existed. If anything happens again, and I'm not at school, can you tell Miss Braxton? Please. I don't think I can tell her myself. I stared at the screen until my eyes blurred. I wasn't crying. It was just the weight of being seen, all at once, after decades of being erased, not imagined, not exaggerated, not made up for attention. It happened. It was real. I scrolled up and reread the email. Just 3 lines. Olivia never liked drama. She only ever said what needed saying. I opened my voice recorder app and just sat there, phone resting on my knee, letting the air fill with the kind of silence that doesn't sting. And then I started speaking. They always said I was dramatic, that I lied, that I made things up because I couldn't handle reality, but I handled it just fine. I handled it quietly. Too quietly. I paused. A car passed. A woman walked her dog across the street. The world kept moving. They made me think pain was a performance, that unless it left a trail of broken dishes or black eyes, it didn't count. But bruises fade. Lies stay. My hands didn't shake this time. I saved the file, named it, Statement Draft 1. I opened a blank email and began to write, not to send just yet, but to prepare, to be ready. To the hospital's ethics board. To the legal team, to the media, if I had to. This wasn't revenge, this was clarity. They taught me how to keep secrets, but they forgot that secrets written down have a way of surviving. I wasn't going to let them write my story in pencil again. By the time I stood up, my spine felt taller than it had all morning. I wasn't angry, I was aligned. I started walking. No destination, just moving. That kind of movement you do when your body needs to burn through memory. As I passed the coffee shop on the corner, my phone vibrated again. A text. Lorelei. Still breathing? I smiled without meaning to. Typed back. Yes, for now. I kept walking. By the time I circled back to the hospital entrance, dusk had crept in. The lights inside the building flickered to life one by one. I didn't go back in. I didn't need to. Instead, I pulled out my phone again, opened the email from Olivia one more time, and saved the attachments to a private folder titled, They Knew. Because they did. They knew what Vera was, what Coraline protected, what Merrick ignored. They didn't just let it happen. They orchestrated it, maintained it, used it. They didn't just forget what they did. They counted on me forgetting. But I didn't. And now, I wouldn't let anyone else forget either. I stood there, staring at Vera through the narrow glass pane, her expression still molded in that smug half-smile. She hadn't expected me to find out. That much was clear. The silence between us wasn't quiet. It was loaded. Not with confusion, not with grief, with calculation. I turned and walked away, heading down the hallway just as Dr. Hallstrom waved me back into his office. His tone hadn't changed from earlier, measured, clinical, but his eyes flickered with something else this time, caution. Ms. Hale, thank you for coming back in, he said, motioning to the chair across from him. I sat without a word. I was done exchanging pleasantries. He pulled up a file on his screen and tapped the screen with his pen. Something's off in your file. I'm trying to verify all registry activity, and it shows you were already tested for compatibility 6 months ago. I blinked. Yes, I was. I submitted a donor test last October when I first heard Vera was sick. He tilted his head. The issue is, your mother marked on intake that you hadn't, that this was your first evaluation. My stomach clenched, but my voice stayed steady. Was the result sent to her? He nodded slowly. You listed Coraline Hale as your emergency contact. The National Donor Registry confirmed they emailed the results to her. along with the standard letter indicating you were not a match. For a second, I couldn't breathe. She knew. She had the answer. She read it, and she still dragged me here like livestock, like I owed them my body simply because they fed me once. I closed my eyes. That wasn't a lie. That was sabotage. I want a printed copy, I said, finally. Of that email and the registry's confirmation, I want it for my records. He nodded, clicking through a few screens before standing. Give me a few minutes. I'll print and stamp the documents and bring them back myself. When he left, I let out a slow breath, then opened my phone. The screen glared back at me, filled with texts from Mom, Vera, and even Dad, all unread, all unnecessary. I typed a new message to Lorelai. She lied about the test. She had it the whole time. I wasn't a match. I never was. Seconds later, her reply popped up. Do you have proof? I replied with a screenshot and added, I'm asking the hospital to document it now. Her next message came fast. Good. Send me the full copy. Time to start protecting yourself. Fully. The door creaked open again. Dr. Hallstrom re-entered, holding a manila folder. He handed it to me without sitting down. You'll find a notarized statement inside, along with the original registry letter and timestamps showing who accessed it. It's all legally admissible, should that become necessary. Thank you, I said, meaning it. He hesitated, then added, I understand this is a personal matter, but from a medical ethics standpoint, withholding that information wasn't just inappropriate, it was dangerous. I didn't nod, didn't speak. I just stood and left. I passed by Vera's room again, and this time, I didn't glance through the window. I stopped right in the doorway. She looked up from her phone, still in bed, IV lines trailing from her arm. Her smile was smaller now, more measured. You know I'm not a match, I said, my voice soft but anchored. Her mouth twitched, but no words followed. You always knew, I added. Did you think I'd keep bending forever? Still nothing. Just a blink. One slow, stunned blink. I stepped away before she could respond, walking with more resolve than I had since this circus began. At the elevator bank, I pressed the button and waited. I stared at the soft glow of the downlight as if it held secrets I hadn't yet uncovered. When the doors opened, I stepped in. Alone, I wasn't ready to leave the hospital entirely. Not yet. I headed down to the small atrium cafe tucked behind the pharmacy. It was nearly empty, save for a young couple bickering quietly at a table and a nurse sipping tea by the window. I ordered a coffee I didn't need and sat near the far corner, opening the folder once again. Page after page. Stamped, signed, everything I needed. I started drafting an official statement, not just to the hospital, but for the legal record. I, Sydney Hale, was previously tested for organ donor compatibility with Vera Hale in October of last year. The test results confirmed I was not a biological match. These results were sent to Coraline Hale, who deliberately withheld them from both me and the treating physician. I am making this formal statement to confirm that any implied refusal to donate was based not on indifference or cruelty, but on a lack of compatibility, information my family had but chose not to disclose. I reserve the right to pursue further action if this information is used to coerce, shame, or defame me in any form. It was clean, direct, honest, and it was mine. I emailed the draft to Lorelai, attached copies of the documents, then powered off my phone. Just for a little while, I needed the quiet, because even though they lied to me about everything, I was the one who had to live with the pieces. They didn't just manipulate me. They manipulated the system, the records, the expectations. But now, for the first time, the paper trail didn't favor them. It favored me. And the silence I'd worn like armor for years, it was no longer a shield. It was a weapon. I didn't wait for Vera to speak. I didn't need to. That blink told me everything. She hadn't expected me to find out. Not about the test, not about the email, not about anything. She thought I would do what I'd always done. Take the guilt, swallow the pain, play the part. But not this time. I stepped away from the doorway and made my way down the corridor, past the elevators and toward a quieter wing. I found a spot in a corner alcove where the hospital had set up a few chairs and a water dispenser. The lighting was dimmer there, tucked away from the traffic of nurses and family members buzzing between rooms. My legs finally gave out as I lowered myself into a chair and placed the manila folder, still warm from the copier, on my lap. I felt the shift in my body first, not rage, not even sadness, just a clarity that made everything else quieter, like static cutting out. That's when she appeared. A nurse, young, maybe late 20s. She walked over, hesitating. "You okay?" she asked softly. I didn't nod. I didn't shake my head. She placed the cup in my hand, her voice barely a whisper. "You don't have to do anything you don't want to," she said. "Even if they scream." I looked up. Her eyes were steady. She wasn't guessing. She knew. And just like that, something reset inside me. Not everything, not all at once, but something. "Thank you," I said. My voice cracked. She stood and walked away without another word. She didn't linger. She didn't wait for recognition. Just did what no one else had done. Acknowledged the mess without asking me to clean it up first. I sipped the water. It was cold, real, and I held on to that sensation for exactly 2 seconds before I heard the sound of determined footsteps. They were close, familiar, Coraline, and Merrick. Of course, they moved like a two-person storm, her face flushed, his expression unreadable. She had a clipboard in her hand, and I knew what was on it before she even lifted it. Consent forms. "Where the hell have you been?" Coraline hissed. Her voice was low, sharp. "We've been looking for you." I stood slowly, placing the empty cup on the seat beside me. I needed air. Merrick didn't speak, just stared. Like always, she shoved the clipboard toward me. "Sign it." "No." Her eyes widened. "Sydney, don't do this. You're her sister." I shook my head. "I'm not, and you knew that before I did." Her hand trembled slightly. "This isn't about DNA. This is about family, about love, about decency." I stepped back. "No, it's about control. It always has been." Merrick's hand moved suddenly, not violent, just fast. He grabbed my forearm. Coraline stepped forward with the clipboard again. "Sign it," she said. "For your sister. For your soul." That's when I snapped. Not loud, not dramatic, but final. "Touch me again," I said, locking eyes with Merrick, "and I will press charges. You think that clipboard protects you? It doesn't. I have proof now. Real proof." He let go. Instantly. A nurse nearby, maybe alerted by the tension, appeared from around the corner. She glanced between us. "Everything all right here?" she asked, voice calm but firm. I nodded. "I'm leaving." Coraline turned to the nurse. "She's trying to abandon her sister. She's making this about herself." The nurse looked at me, then back to Coraline. "That's her decision. If she needs a patient advocate, we can arrange it, but you don't get to speak for her." That shut Coraline up, at least momentarily. I turned and walked away, the sound of her sobbing beginning to fill the hallway behind me. Not grief, not fear, just the performance she thought still worked. I made it back to the hospital lobby and found a small seating area near the front windows. I sat down, opened my phone, and forwarded every document I had: test results, registry timestamps, a summary of what had just happened. I CC'd the hospital ethics board, their legal team, and Lorelei. I added one line at the bottom. "I did not refuse. I was never eligible. They knew, they lied, and they tried to force it anyway." I pressed send. Then I turned off my phone, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to explain myself anymore. Not to them, not to anyone. This wasn't about defending who I was. This was about documenting who they were. I didn't sleep that night, not even a little. I spent the first half pacing the living room of the apartment I was renting month to month near the hospital. The blinds were still open from earlier, city lights leaking in through the glass, painting long shadows across the hardwood floor. By 3 a.m., I was sitting at the kitchen table, the folder from the hospital spread in front of me, highlighter in one hand, pen in the other. I wasn't their daughter. I was their contingency plan, their leverage. And now I had something they didn't expect. Paperwork. By the time I returned to the hospital in the morning, my steps felt slower, but each one landed firmer than the last. I went straight to the front desk and asked to speak with Dr. Hallstrom again. He saw me 15 minutes later, his expression unreadable as he invited me back into his office. "I've reviewed the file," he began, careful, professional, but not cold. "There's something you need to see. It's unusual." He turned his screen to face me, a scanned copy of a form, hospital letterhead. My name typed neatly at the top. Medical power of attorney. Signed, Sydney Hale. Dated 4 weeks ago. I frowned. "That's not my signature." He didn't look surprised. "It doesn't match the one on your intake forms, or your registry test. But the document was submitted by a family member during Vera's readmission." I could feel my teeth clench. "Who submitted it?" "Your mother, Coraline Hale." Of course. A forged document, used to claim I'd already given consent. Probably so they could fast-track whatever guilt campaign they were planning next. Or worse, authorize something without ever needing my signature again. I asked for a printed copy. He handed it over immediately. "This is going in a complaint," I told him, "with the hospital's legal team. And with my lawyer." He gave a single nod. "We'll cooperate fully. I've already started notifying administration." I walked out of that room with the document tucked under my arm like a weapon, and I didn't wait. Back in the visitor's lounge, I sat down and snapped a photo of the forged document. I opened an email to Lorelei, attached the photo, and typed just one line. "They forged my consent." This just turned into something bigger. Before I could even hit send, another message popped up. From her, "Need me to call the press yet? Or still hoping they have a soul somewhere in there?" I smiled. Dry, bitter. But I smiled. "Let's start with the ethics board," I replied. "Then let's see what burns first." I hit send. And then I stood, turned toward the elevator, and pressed the button that would take me to Vera's floor. She was awake when I walked in. Sitting up slightly, flipping through a magazine she clearly wasn't reading. Her expression didn't change when she saw me. "You knew," I said, my voice quiet. "You knew I wasn't a match. You saw the results." She didn't deny it, didn't even blink. "And yet," I continued, "you let them drag me in here like livestock. You watched them tear me apart in the hallway. You let them scream that I was letting you die." She gave a small shrug. "You showed up, didn't you?" The audacity in that sentence. The calculation. She didn't need to yell. She didn't need to lie. She just needed to wait. "I came because I thought I could still believe in something," I said. "Not because of you, certainly not for them." She tilted her head, resting it back against the pillow. "You're still making it about yourself." I took a step closer. Not aggressive, just to be sure she heard me clearly. "I sent every document to the board. I have the original registry results, the forged power of attorney, the timestamps, your text history. I didn't just come for the fight, Vera. I brought the receipts." Something flickered across her face then. Not fear, just annoyance. Like I was an inconvenient knot in the middle of her carefully tied ribbon. As I turned to leave, I said one last thing. "You didn't win. You just delayed the truth." I left the room and didn't look back. Downstairs, I made a second set of emails, one to the hospital's compliance department, one to their legal office, and another to Lorelei again. Each one carried every document, every line, every date. By noon, the hospital responded with an acknowledgement of receipt. They would begin an internal investigation immediately. The email ended with this sentence: "Thank you for bringing this to our attention. We take ethical violations seriously." I stared at that line for a long moment, because it wasn't just about ethics, it was about dignity, about not being turned into a tool because someone else thought your body should be an extension of their regret. By 3 p.m., I started drafting a legal affidavit, a formal statement under oath. I wrote it cleanly, without metaphor, without rage, just facts. I included everything. The lie about the test, the forged document, the manipulation. And then at the very end, I added one line that wasn't required, but it was mine. This is not a daughter's rebellion. It's a woman's refusal to be erased. If they wanted war, they should have picked someone who didn't already survive one. By the time I stepped out of the elevator and walked back toward the main lobby, the hospital felt strangely alive, buzzing with the kind of curated urgency that only appears when cameras are involved. I knew something was happening before I saw it. The hush in the air wasn't about illness, it was about image. Through the glass partition separating the main hallway from the media room, I saw the podium. A small banner hung behind it. Community Gratitude Ceremony, WakeMed Medical Center. Coraline stood tall behind the microphone, clad in her usual navy blue blazer. Merrick was next to her, posture stiff, chin high. A live video feed of Vera played on a monitor beside them. She was reclined in her hospital bed, an oxygen line under her nose, smiling faintly. I hadn't been told this was happening. No one mentioned a press conference. And yet, there they were, our family's picture-perfect trio. I moved closer, just outside the line of sight, and listened. "We are deeply grateful for the anonymous donor," Coraline said, her voice composed, every syllable soaked in performance. "Because of their generosity and the support of this incredible medical staff, our daughter Vera is alive today." Anonymous. My stomach clenched. She continued, "This experience has reminded us of the strength of community, of compassion, and the power of love within families." No mention of me, not even a sideways acknowledgement. They had rewritten the story. Again, Merrick stepped forward. It's easy to point fingers during hardship, but true character shows in silence. We want to focus on healing now. Not division. I watched myself disappear in real time. Not a name, not a breath. The photos on the easel showed Vera smiling with Merrick at her side, Coraline holding her hand during a treatment, hospital staff posed in the background. No Sydney. They were burying me in front of a crowd and doing it with applause. I turned, walked briskly toward the west hallway, and waited near the side exit. When the cameras shut off and the room began to clear, I saw Coraline step out first, holding her phone, waving to someone off screen. I didn't wait. I approached her directly, my voice low but unmistakable. "You knew I was in the building." She didn't even flinch. "You forfeited the right to be part of this family." The cruelty wasn't even veiled anymore. I pulled out my phone and opened my message thread with Lorelei, preparing to send her the link to the live stream recording I'd just captured. Coraline's eyes darted to the screen. "What are you doing?" "Sending evidence," I said plainly, "because you just erased me on camera." Her hand moved before I expected it. She reached forward and smacked the phone from my hand, hard. It hit the floor with a loud crack. People turned. A nurse gasped. One of the volunteer staff standing nearby took a step forward. Coraline stared down at the shattered phone screen, chest heaving slightly. Her voice quivered, but not with fear. Rage. "You want to ruin everything, don't you?" I looked at her, not with fear, not with sadness, with a calm I didn't know I had left. "You already did that for me." I crouched slowly, picked up the pieces of my phone, screen spidered, casing bent, and turned to the security guard now hurrying down the hall. He stopped beside me. "Ma'am, are you all right?" I nodded once, then held up what remained of the phone. "Please log this as evidence. I'll be filing a restraining order today." Coraline's face paled just slightly. Not because of guilt, because the performance was over. The audience wasn't clapping anymore. The security guard looked between us. "Do you want me to escort you to the administration desk?" "No," I said. "I'll handle it." I walked past Coraline, my broken phone cradled in my hand like something sacred, something final. The hallway had never felt longer. When I stepped outside into the sunlight, I didn't rush. I sat on the bench near the main entrance, pulled out the hospital-issued visitor tablet from my tote bag, and logged into my backup email. Lorelei had already sent me the clip from the press conference. She'd edited it, labeled the file. Sydney erased, WakeMed press event. I typed, they erased my name, but I was about to engrave the truth in stone. I hit send. The conference had ended, but I hadn't. Not yet. I walked straight from that bench outside the hospital toward the main building, not even glancing at the volunteers still rearranging chairs from the press event. The air buzzed with aftermath. Polite handshakes, small talk, someone laughing too loud because they didn't know what else to say. I kept walking, through the automatic doors, past the security checkpoint, and into the elevator without slowing my pace. I pressed the button for the administrative floor and waited. When the doors opened, Dr. Hallstrom was standing at the end of the corridor, holding a folder. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes held something heavier than confusion, something like regret. "Thanks for coming up," he said. "I didn't want this buried in another inbox." He led me to a private consultation room. No windows, just a table, 2 chairs, and a subtle hum from the overhead light. He sat first, opened the folder. "There's a genetic marker conflict," he began, folding his hands on the table. "We reran everything to be sure, twice." I didn't speak. I already knew what was coming. "You are not biologically related," he said. "At all." 6 words, that was all. And yet, the room tilted slightly under me. I laughed. Not from humor, from the way something in me cracked so wide that air got in. "That explains everything," I said, barely above a whisper. He nodded slowly, as if offering space for whatever came next. But I didn't cry, didn't gasp. I just sat there, letting the weight of it settle like dust on an old box finally opened. "Thank you," I said. "I'll need all the official documents. Everything. Print and digital." "You'll have them," he replied. "Do you want to talk to someone?" "No," I said. "I'm going to talk to everyone." It was already in motion. I left the room, the folder tucked under my arm, and made my way to the main floor. By the time I reached the media corridor, my heart wasn't racing anymore. It was locked into rhythm, like it knew this was the moment I'd been walking toward for years. Security at the side door shifted when I approached. One of them raised a hand, hesitating. "I'm here to speak," I said. "It won't take long." He looked at the badge still clipped to my blouse and stepped aside. Just beyond the door, I saw Lorelei waiting. She didn't smile, just gave a single, knowing nod. "You sure?" she asked. More than I've ever been. The room was still lit, the press still packing equipment, but the mics were live. A few cameras hadn't shut off yet. I walked to the podium. No one stopped me. I placed the folder down, opened it. "I won't take your time," I began. "Just your attention." Every movement in the room paused. "My name is Sydney Hale. You didn't hear that name during the ceremony today, but it matters." I held up the first paper. "This is the test result from the National Donor Registry, dated October. It says I am not a match to Vera Hale." I lifted another. "This is the forged consent form submitted in my name, without my knowledge." And another. "This is a message admitting that Vera knew I wasn't a match, that she hid the result, and that my mother, Coralyn Hale, deliberately withheld it from the hospital." Flashes went off, phones lifted. I was adopted. I was never told. And I was brought here under the assumption that I could save someone who spent her entire life watching me bleed and calling it drama. A ripple of noise moved through the crowd. They tried to use my body to fix a lie. They erased me from their story, thinking no one would notice. I took one last breath. I don't want revenge. I want no more silence. I stepped away from the podium. Behind me, Coraline fainted in her seat. The thud was audible even over the whispers. Merrick tried to stand, to speak, but the murmurs drowned him out. Someone from the hospital staff rushed to Coraline's side. Vera's video feed, still playing on the back screen, froze, then went black. A reporter called out, "Do you want justice or revenge?" I turned back, just once. "Neither," I said. "I want to never have to explain myself to them again." And I meant it. I walked out, folder still in my hands, past the stunned audience, past the blinking cameras. No one tried to stop me, because they couldn't. It was a quiet Thursday morning when I finally stepped back into my apartment. No cameras, no doctors, no voice raised in guilt. Just stillness. 1 week had passed since the press conference. The internet had already grabbed it, twisted it, and recycled it into headlines. Adopted daughter exposes forged consent in organ donation scandal. Family secrets unraveled on camera. Hospital ethics board launches investigation. I didn't read the comment sections. I didn't need to. Coraline had collapsed at the press event and was placed under medical watch that same evening. Heart strain, they said. Stress-induced. A part of me wondered if it was real or another layer of performance. Merrick hadn't been seen publicly since. No official statement, no apology. Not that I expected one. Vera was discharged the day before. No social media update, no well-lit photos captioned with Bible verses, just digital silence. For the first time in my life, I was louder than all of them. That morning, I sat on my small balcony with a cup of black coffee, staring out at the slow rhythm of downtown Raleigh. It was the first time in a long while I didn't feel watched. Mid-morning, I got a call from the hospital's legal office. They confirmed that my liver had never been a viable match for Vera's condition. Not marginal, not partial, not even close. Even if I had said yes, it wouldn't have mattered. It was never about saving her. It was about controlling me. I thanked them for the call. Politely, calmly. Then I sat back in my chair and let out a breath I'd been holding since I was 13. Maybe earlier. Later that afternoon, I got another message, this time from Vera. "Can we meet? Just the two of us, please?" I stared at the screen for a while before typing back. "Where?" She sent a reply. "Hospital Garden, the South Path, 5 p.m. At 4:45, I walked into the garden alone. The sky was a gentle blue-gray, like it couldn't decide if it wanted to rain or not. Vera was sitting on a bench beneath the birch trees. No makeup, no camera angle, just her, small in a hoodie and hospital-issued socks. She didn't stand when I arrived, just looked up and gestured beside her. I didn't sit. After a moment, she spoke. "They only kept you in case I needed something one day." The words hit me like cold wind, not because they surprised me, but because of how calmly she said them. "I always thought you knew," she added. "No," I replied, "but I always felt it." She nodded. "Just once." We didn't fight. There was nothing left to wrestle for. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she said quietly. "Good," I answered, "because I'm not offering it." Another pause. Wind brushed through the leaves, making them chatter. "But I hope you find something better than this," I added. "Because what they did to both of us, it doesn't deserve to follow us forever." She didn't cry. I didn't expect her to. I walked away without saying goodbye. Some endings don't need a curtain. The next day, I went to the county clerk's office and picked up the paperwork for a legal name change. Sydney Hale. I kept the name I had built for myself, not theirs, not one given in obligation, mine. Downtown Raleigh looked different walking through it that afternoon. The buildings were the same, the people the same, but I was not. I stopped by a print shop and signed the last page of the form. As I stepped back onto the sidewalk, I whispered to myself, I didn't need revenge. I needed the truth. And the truth? It was always mine. They just tried to bury it under obligation. That night, after dinner, I sat at my desk and found a small envelope among a stack of forwarded mail. No return address, just a postmark from Arizona. Inside, a handwritten note. "Hi, Sydney. I saw your story. I'm adopted too. I didn't know I could say no either. Thank you for showing me it's okay to speak up. I'm 17. You gave me something I didn't know I was allowed to have. Choice. No signature. Just, from someone who now knows she's not alone." I smiled, folded the letter gently, and slid it into the top drawer of my desk. Not in the file labeled Evidence, but in the one labeled Keepsakes. Because now, it was no longer proof of pain. It was the beginning of peace. Some families collapse under the weight of their lies, but I built my life on the truth, and that's more than enough. Sometimes the hardest truth to accept is the one we've always suspected, that love can be conditional, and family can fail you in ways that leave invisible scars. But silence doesn't have to be permanent. Sydney's story reminds us that speaking up, even when it's painful, is often the first step to healing. Have you ever felt erased by the people who were supposed to protect you? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more true, emotional stories like this one. You're not alone, and your story matters.
Hi there, I'm Carlina. 4 years ago, I was diagnosed with cancer, and my parents told me, "We're done being parents." While I was in surgery, they were on vacation. While I was recovering, my brother stole from my chemo fund. And when I finally stood up for myself, they came back, not with love, but with demands. They sold my things, lied about me online, called my friend to blame her for my boundaries. Now they say they're sorry. But if walking away makes me heartless, what does leaving your daughter during cancer make you? I walked out of the oncology building with a folder clutched to my chest. Treatment plan, lab results, insurance paperwork, everything they give you when your life just split in two. The November air was biting, but it wasn't the kind of cold that made me shiver. It was the kind that settled in your bones and stayed there. I didn't cry, not in the car, not when the light turned green and the traffic crept forward. I just drove, quiet, focused on nothing but the road ahead. That evening, I sat across from my parents in their living room. Same beige carpet, same faint scent of lemon polish. I held the folder in my lap, trying to find the words. "I have breast cancer," I said finally, the words dry and factual, like reading off a grocery list. My mother blinked once, twice. Then she straightened her back, folded her hands and said, "Let's not tell anyone just yet. No need to make the family nervous." I thought I misheard her. "I'm not announcing it on TV," I said. "I'm telling you because you're my parents." Victor didn't even look up. He turned a page in the sports section like I'd just told him I was switching toothpaste brands. "You're strong, Carlina," Mom added. "You don't need attention. We raised you to handle things, not make a fuss." It wasn't yelling. It wasn't cruel. But something in me cracked all the same. Not loud, just final. On the drive home, I didn't put on music. I didn't call anyone. I just stared out the windshield. The glow of traffic lights painting everything in red and green and nothing. At home, I pulled out a blank notebook and wrote the first entry with a shaking hand. Diagnosis, stage 2B. Reaction, minimized. Verdict, you're on your own. I closed the book and stared at it for a long time. That night, I didn't call my friends. I didn't text my coworkers. I let the silence stretch. If my parents had already decided what this story would be, maybe it was time I started writing my own version. 2 weeks passed. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't need their pity, and after what my parents said, I wasn't sure I'd believe any concern was real. But the bills started arriving, stacked envelopes with bold print warnings and medical codes I couldn't even pronounce. That afternoon, I sat at my kitchen counter, my laptop open, fingers hovering over the keyboard. I logged into my bank account, ready to move funds from the small savings account I'd set aside for treatment. It wasn't much, just over $3,000. I had hoped it would cover the gap before my insurance kicked in. The balance showed $612. I stared at the screen, refreshed it. Twice. Then I clicked into the transaction history. 4 withdrawals, 2 listed as online game stores, 1 as a ride-share charge over $200, and another, larger one, a retreat deposit. Some kind of recovery getaway center in Vermont. I checked the account holder info linked to the purchases. Lyle White, my brother. I didn't even think. I called him right then. "Yeah?" His voice was half asleep. "You took over $2,000 from my treatment fund." There was a long pause, then lazily, "Look, I was going through stuff, stress. I didn't think you'd miss it." "You didn't think I'd—" My mouth went dry. "It was a medical account, Lyle. I'm starting chemo next week." "You've got insurance. You work full-time, I don't. And Mom said you'd understand. You're always the one who handles things." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't scream. I just said, very clearly, You stole from your sister's chemo fund and you're justifying it with stress? You don't get it. You've always been the favorite. I hung up. Later that night, I told my mother. Her response was a sigh that sounded rehearsed. He's just having a rough time. Can't you try to be the bigger person here? Victor didn't even speak. He was probably still hiding behind his crossword puzzles like he always did. I didn't bother responding. I ended the call, walked to the drawer where I kept that notebook, and sat down. November 12th. Amount withdrawn, $2,430. Explanation, stress family response excused. My response noted, not forgiven. Then I wrote one more line, slowly underlined 3 times. Being strong doesn't mean being disposable. The ink on that page had barely dried when my phone buzzed. It was Dr. Kent's office, my oncologist. We can't wait, the nurse said. Your imaging came back. We need you in Friday morning for surgery. Full mastectomy. My heart didn't race. It didn't even thump. It just paused, like it needed a second to understand. I thanked her, hung up, and texted my parents. Group chat, no dramatic announcement, just surgery scheduled for Friday morning, St. Charles Medical, check-in at 6:45 a.m. No reply from my mom. Lyle read it, then left it on seen. Thursday night, I laid out my hospital bag on the couch. It wasn't a lot, just sweatpants, my charger, chapstick. I stared at the zipper for a long time before finally closing it. The next morning, the city was still half asleep when I checked in. The surgical wing smelled like antiseptic and old carpet. A nurse walked me to pre-op and gestured toward a line of empty chairs. Anyone here with you? She asked kindly. I shook my head. Not yet. But I knew. They weren't coming. I pulled out my phone and texted Leora. I hadn't planned to, but something about those empty chairs made it impossible not to. She didn't ask questions. Just said, send me the hospital name. I'm on my way. Minutes later, I was in a gown under fluorescent lights, the IV dripping slowly beside me. When the nurse came back with a clipboard, she asked the question I'd been dreading. We'll need someone to sign your release. Family? I paused, then looked her in the eye. Use Leora Morgan. She's on her way. An hour later, I was rolled toward the operating room. The last face I saw was hers, hair pulled up, hospital coffee in one hand, her signature already drying on the consent form. When I woke up, everything hurt. My chest felt like concrete, my throat like sandpaper. I blinked through the fog and saw her, still there, scrolling through her phone beside the bed. You made it, I whispered. She smiled, soft. You didn't think I'd let you go through this alone, did you? Did anyone else? I couldn't finish the sentence. No one even asked which hospital you were at, she said. That night, back in my room, under dim hospital light, I opened my notebook again. November 18th, emergency surgery. Present, one friend from work. Absent, everyone who shares my blood. I added a final line in bold strokes. Family isn't who shows up in your baby pictures. It's who shows up when you're cut open and scared. The stitches were still tender when I opened my laptop the next week, mostly to check my insurance portal. But a notification popped up. Darlene White posted a new status. Against my better judgment, I clicked. Some people forget who stood by them their whole life. Sad what money and attention can do to family. I didn't even need to read the comments, but I did. Cousin Marlene wrote, You're such a strong mom, she'll come around. A neighbor chimed in, Kids these days, no sense of loyalty. I didn't cry. I didn't reply. I took a screenshot, saved it in a folder I had just renamed Documentation, and opened my notebook. An hour later, my phone lit up with a call from Dad. Carlina, hey, listen, your grandparents aren't doing well. Your mother and I need rest too. Maybe it's time you come back and stay here for a while, just a few months. I paused, let the words sink in, then answered, I'm still healing from surgery. I can't lift anything heavier than a coffee mug. That's why you're not working, right? I mean, you're home all day. My blood pressure rose. I gripped the edge of the counter, taking one steadying breath. If someone needs care, maybe start with Lyle. He's not sick. He's not recovering. And he's already living there. Victor's tone shifted, tight, sharp. Don't speak about your brother like that. He's had a tough year. And what about my year? I asked. I lost a part of my body and nobody showed up, not even a voicemail. But now you want my body to show up for caregiving? Silence. Don't speak to me like I'm your backup plan. I hung up. That evening, I didn't open my work laptop. I didn't answer texts. I took a red pen to a fresh notebook page and wrote only one sentence. Slow, all caps. Blood is not a contract. It was early afternoon when my phone lit up with a message from Leora. I was halfway through a reheated bowl of soup, trying to stretch enough energy to sit upright on the couch. Your mom just called my office. I froze. My stomach turned. I called her instantly. What did she say? She said I'm making you think you don't need your family, that I'm poisoning you against them. Her voice was steady, but underneath I heard the restraint. The fury she was holding back for my sake. I didn't hesitate. I dialed Darlene's number. You don't get to harass the only person who's been there for me, I said the second she picked up. Her tone was cold, familiar. She's inflating your ego. You used to be humble, Carlina. No, I said calmly. I used to be scared. You liked me that way. Silence on her end, but not for long. You think you're better than us now, don't you? Just because you've got a paycheck and someone signing hospital forms? Better than people who left me to face cancer alone? Yeah, I might be. Darlene inhaled sharply. Then, like it was nothing, she dropped the line I think she'd rehearsed. Then maybe we're done being parents. I waited a beat. Let the weight of that sentence settle like dust on a coffin lid. Then I answered, maybe you never were. I didn't scream, I didn't beg, I didn't cry, I just ended the call. Not blocked, not silenced, just done. That night, I sat in bed under a quilt Leora had brought over from her mom's house. The stitches beneath my shirt still tugged when I moved too fast. But I felt something settle, a clean break. I opened my notebook. In block letters I wrote, no funeral, no obituary, but the death of a daughter who finally let go. The next morning, I opened the blinds and let light pour across the living room floor. For once, I didn't sit with a cup of tea or sink into the couch to numb the day away. I grabbed 3 empty boxes, rolled up my sleeves, and decided to start decluttering. Anything I could throw away to reclaim some space in this place, in my life. One drawer held old bills, another, Christmas cards from years when people still signed their names. Then I pulled out a manila envelope labeled in bold marker, Important Family Only. Inside, nestled among old tax forms and church bulletins, was a folded piece of stationery in my mother's handwriting. No envelope, no stamp, just a letter that was never meant for my eyes. I read it. Carlina is the stable one. She'll never leave us. If Lyle struggles, we have her. She's not exceptional, but she's dependable, the safety net. Not even the strong one, not the kind one, just the backup plan. I sank to the floor, the paper still in my hands, my chest tightening, not from the stitches, from the sentence that rewrote everything I had tried to believe. The next wave hit before I could brace for it. I noticed my laptop bag was lighter than usual. I opened it. Empty. My college bracelet, the one with the charm I had worn through job interviews and chemo consults, was also missing from the jewelry dish. I called the pawn shop down on Tremont, the one that never asked too many questions. The woman checked her vendor log. Yep, MacBook, charm bracelet, came in last Thursday, name listed, Victor White, said it was for medical emergency funds. I didn't need to ask whose emergency, I already knew. Lyle. I sat in silence for a while. No screaming, no phone calls, no dramatic demands, just a match. I took the letter, struck the flame, and watched it curl inside the kitchen sink, edges blackening, the ink bleeding out like poison. I was never your safety net, I whispered, staring into the ashes. I was the one you let fall first. 4 years can change a lot. Your body heals, your job title shifts, your friends become family. But some knocks still hit like they used to. It was a Saturday morning. I'd just finished wiping down the kitchen counter when there it was, a knock at the door. I opened it and froze. There they stood. Darlene, eyes red like she'd been rehearsing her pain for hours. Victor held a Bible like it might give him credibility. Lyle just looked tired, like life finally caught up to him. We've lost the house, Darlene began, voice thin. Victor stepped forward, eyes avoiding mine. We were wrong, Carlina, about everything. I need help, Lyle muttered. Sis, please. I didn't say a word. I didn't invite them in. I didn't move. I closed the door. By that evening, Darlene had taken it to Facebook. We begged for forgiveness. She shut us out. So sad what pride does to family. The comment section lit up with support for her. Cousins, church friends, even her old co-workers chimed in. "You're such a good mom." She's been through so much. Kids these days forget their roots. I didn't respond, but others did. Elisa, my cousin, commented first. "Carlina was in surgery. You were in Florida. Let's not rewrite history." Then Leora. "I signed her surgical release because nobody else showed up." Nadine added receipts, literal screenshots of texts, bank transfers, silence. Suddenly, the post vanished, deleted. But not before it was screen captured, saved, shared. Later that night, I opened the family group chat, the one I hadn't touched in years. I typed, "You didn't lose a daughter. You lost access. I didn't leave. I was removed. And I won't be returning." Then I exited the group. By Wednesday, I thought the storm had passed. The passive-aggressive comments had died down. The silence from the family chat felt like a strange kind of peace. No new vague posts, no middle-of-the-night calls. I had started to let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, they had finally moved on, or at least backed off. I was wrong. At exactly 7:04 a.m., my phone lit up like a warning siren. 14 missed calls, every number unsaved, but instantly recognizable. You don't forget the numbers of people who only reach out when drama is brewing. The kind of calls that aren't about checking in, they're about pulling you back into the fire. A message came in from my cousin, Elisa. Just a screenshot and a link. No words. She didn't have to say anything. The image said enough. There it was. Darlene's new post on Facebook. A filtered photo of our family from some years ago barbecue. The kind of event where everyone plays nice in public and bleeds in private. I was smiling in the picture. Wide, open, convincing. But that smile was the biggest lie I ever told. And then the caption. "A daughter's silence can break a parent's heart." We loved her, we still do. But sometimes, pride builds higher walls than forgiveness. I read it 3 times, not because I didn't understand it, but because I needed to feel the full weight of the hypocrisy. She knew what she was doing. This wasn't a plea for healing. It was a performance, one designed to shift blame and frame a narrative where I was the cold, ungrateful one who turned away for no reason. This time, I didn't cry. I didn't respond in anger or try to call and explain myself again. I'd done that before. It never changed anything. They didn't want truth. They wanted control. So I did something different. By noon, I had an email drafted. There was no venom in it. No insults, just truth. Cold, clear, documented. Subject line, "Since we're talking family, I attach the evidence." Every file, every screenshot, every document that told the story they kept trying to erase. Bank statements showing Lyle's unauthorized withdrawals from the joint account while I was sedated. Screenshots of my messages, unanswered, when I first told them about my diagnosis. Photographs of hospital bracelets, dated and time-stamped. The surgical release form signed by Leora, who insisted on acting as guardian without telling me. Messages from Darlene, explicitly telling me not to embarrass the family by making my illness public. Then I sent it, to every family member whose email I still had. I didn't wait for their replies. I didn't want to read their defenses, their guilt-tripping, their "but you know how she gets" excuses. I muted the thread and went on with my day. By evening, Elisa messaged again. "They're imploding. Darlene deactivated Facebook. Lyle's being roasted in a group chat. Victor, nothing." Of course, Victor stayed silent. That was his legacy, watching everything unfold, always above the fray, never stepping in unless it cost him nothing. But I didn't feel vindicated. There was no surge of victory, no satisfaction in their chaos, just a quiet space inside me where rage used to live. And in that space, something else had started to grow. Resolve. I logged into my legal portal. One by one, I made the changes that mattered. Removed them all as emergency contacts. Filed the paperwork for a legal name change. Uploaded the notarized documents to make it real. And finally, I wrote one last email. No attachments, no explanations, just one line, the only one left to say, This isn't revenge, it's recovery. I'm done playing roles you wrote for me. Then I logged out, for good. The customs line moved slowly, but I didn't mind. I had nowhere to rush to, and for the first time in years, no one to answer to. My entire life fit into one carry-on and one fresh passport with a name only I chose. Lisbon welcomed me with crisp air and a sun that didn't feel performative. I checked into the small hotel, key in hand, no one waiting behind a curtain to tell me what I owed them. I dropped my bag, stepped out onto the balcony, and watched waves roll in like clean slates. The breakfast tray had figs, goat cheese, and something I couldn't pronounce. I didn't take a picture, not yet. First, I reached into my bag and pulled out the new journal. Page 1. Forgiveness is how I stopped hemorrhaging from wounds you kept reopening. I scrolled through the last decade of my photo album, paused at one with Darlene's arms looped around my shoulders. Delete. Then I snapped a new one. Plate, journal, ocean. Back in Boston, I knew things were shifting. Not dramatically, not loud, just the quiet unraveling of a staged life. Darlene's Facebook vanished. Victor resigned from his church board, citing health reasons. Lyle was couch surfing, waiting on a court date for the civil suit tied to his debt. I didn't feel proud. I felt outside of it all, as I should have been long ago. My phone buzzed, Leora checking in. You eat yet? Already did, I texted back. Outside, with sea air. Finally. Later that afternoon, I filed paperwork from the hotel Wi-Fi. Updated my will, listed Leora as next of kin, removed all prior emergency contacts, submitted the final draft of my name change confirmation. I opened the last page of the journal and wrote, I was never the ungrateful daughter. I was the one who finally remembered she belonged to herself. Then I closed the book. I used to think family was something you fought for at all costs. But sometimes, the real fight is learning when to stop bleeding for people who never brought bandages. If you've ever felt like the strong one, the dependable one, the one who always shows up, I want you to know, your worth isn't measured by how much you endure for others. It's measured by how deeply you honor yourself. Healing isn't always loud. Sometimes it's in deleting a photo, rewriting your last name, or waking up in a place where no one expects you to be anything but free. And now I want to ask you something. Have you ever walked away from someone who told you it was your duty to stay? Or maybe you've held on to pain in silence because speaking out felt like betrayal? Tell me in the comments, what did you learn about yourself when you finally let go? If this story touched something in you, drop a 1 in the comments, or tell me where you're watching from. And if it didn't speak to you, that's okay too. Let me know why. Your voice matters here. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, raw, real, and full of heart, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. You never know. The next story might be the one that helps you heal. Until then, be loyal. Not to their version of you, but to your own becoming.